My name is Leonard Burke, and I was 51 years old the morning I bought the lot next door, without telling anyone. It was April 7th, 2009. The grass on Linden Avenue was wet at 7 a.m., and the oak trees were still bare enough to show the sky through them. The counter at the Cobb County Recorder's office was cold laminate under the fluorescent lights, and the deed was 4 pages I had already read twice before I signed. On the drive home, I folded it into thirds and put it in my jacket pocket. Ruth was in the kitchen when I came in. I told her I had taken a walk. I thought it would be a garden. That was what I told myself 14 years ago. What it became was something else entirely. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, the place where quiet men do loud things. If you've ever built something quietly while others claimed it, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Leonard Burke, and I worked the Smurfit-Stone container plant on Austell Road in Marietta for 22 years. Shift supervisor, 14-man crew, second shift. I started in 1997 and retired in 2019 at 61. I know what a plant floor sounds like at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. The specific pitch of machinery that is running correctly versus machinery that is about to fail. I spent 22 years learning the difference. I applied that same attention to everything else. My wife Ruth and I moved to 3017 Linden Avenue in 1994. It was a 2-story house on a quiet block in Marietta, older construction, solid bones, the kind of house that needed consistent attention and rewarded it. Ruth taught 4th grade at a school on Roswell Road for 19 years. Nathan was born in 1987. He grew up on Linden Avenue, left for Georgia State. Came back in 2019 with Patrice Holloway, whom he married that October in a ceremony at a venue in Alpharetta that cost more than my first year's salary at the plant. Ruth died in 2017. Stroke, sudden, a Tuesday morning in June when I was at the hardware store on South Marietta Parkway getting supplies for the east deck repair I had been putting off. She was 57. I came home to a phone that had been ringing and did not stop. My chest went still in the parking lot when I read Nathan's text, and I sat in the truck for a long time before I drove. In 2009, 2 years after the financial crisis had dropped property values on Linden Avenue considerably, the adjacent lot at 3019 came up for sale. It had been a small rental house that was demolished after fire. Nothing left but the foundation slab and the lot boundary. The asking price was $38,400. I had been saving since 2004, plan overtime on double shift weekends, holiday premiums, every non-essential expense deferred for 5 years, and I had the money in a separate account I had opened for the purpose. I drove to the Cobb County Recorder's office on April 7th, 2009, at 7:04 a.m. and completed the purchase before Ruth had finished her coffee. I told no one, not Ruth. I had kept it from her because I had not yet decided what to do with it, and I did not want to explain an intention I had not fully formed. Not Nathan. He was 22 and working his first job and had no reason to know. I maintained the lot the same way I maintained the house next to it. Mowed both parcels every spring and fall, cleared the oak tree debris, kept the Cobb County property taxes current, $1,847 annually, paid every September without discussion. The lot was listed on my personal tax returns and nowhere else. I rebuilt the kitchen at 3017 in 2006, 3 years before the lot purchase. 6 weekends, new cabinets, new countertop, new plumbing rough-in, because Ruth had wanted it since we moved in, and I had finally taken vacation time to do it properly. I re-shingled the roof in 2011 with 2 men from the plant. 3 days, I paid to myself $2,400 in labor plus materials. Nathan was living at home then between jobs, and I did not ask him to contribute. I had replaced the HVAC in the fall of 2018, 2 weeks before Nathan and Patrice moved in, $7,400, paid outright, because I did not want Patrice to move into a house with a system that was 12 years old. In the back of the fireproof box in my study, behind Ruth's papers and the original house deed and the plant pension documents, was a deed for 3019 Linden Avenue. I had kept it there since 2009. The label on the folder said only the address. My stomach dropped the first time I heard Patrice refer to 3017 Linden Avenue as our house. It was a Sunday in November of 2022, 3 years after she and Nathan had moved in. She was on the phone with her sister in the front room, and she used a phrase the way people use phrases they've already settled on, not casually, but with a specificity that suggested it had been in use for some time. I was in the kitchen. I set my coffee down. Nathan and Patrice had moved in when Patrice's firm transferred her to the Marietta office, and they needed housing while they looked for a permanent place. That was the understanding. The looking had slowed over 3 years and then stopped. Patrice had repainted the bedroom without asking. She had replaced 2 pieces of furniture in the front room, Ruth's reading chair, and the side table that had been there since 1994. My throat tightened when I noticed Ruth's photograph had been moved from the mantel to a shelf in the hallway. I did not say anything about the photograph. In the spring of 2022, Patrice began asking questions about the house's structural condition. She asked about the foundation, the electrical panel, the plumbing. She framed each question as concern. I answered each one. In June, she asked Nathan to commission a structural engineer's report, which I learned about from the engineer, a man named Drew Sellers, who called me directly because the property was still in my name and the inspection required my authorization. My hands folded on the counter when I got that call. I authorized the inspection. The report found no deficiencies. In the fall of 2022, Patrice had a conversation with me in the kitchen on a Thursday evening at 6:47 p.m. She sat across the table and said, in the even tone she used for things she had already decided, "Leonard, we've talked about this as a couple. This is our home now, and we need our space. It's nothing personal. It's just that this arrangement isn't working for us anymore." I didn't answer. My breath caught behind my collarbone and held. She said she and Nathan had put together a timeline. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a typed document, dates, action items, a column labeled Leonard's Transition Steps. The first item was dated 6 weeks from that Thursday. I nodded. My jaw held. I said I would think about it. She said she hoped we could keep it amicable. I picked up the paper and folded it into thirds and put it in my shirt pocket. I excused myself and went to my study. I sat at the desk at 7:14 p.m. with the door closed and the fireproof box open in front of me. In the weeks before this conversation, I want to be precise about what I had continued to do for the house on Linden Avenue, while Patrice was preparing her timeline. I had cleared the drainage problem along the east foundation the previous spring, rented the equipment myself, worked 3 consecutive Saturdays because Nathan had mentioned water pooling after heavy rain. I had covered the homeowner's insurance on both properties every year since Ruth died, $3,240 annually combined, because the 3019 lot required its own liability rider. I had repainted the entire exterior of 3017 in the spring of 2020 because Patrice had mentioned the color looked tired. I had co-signed Nathan's car loan in 2019 when the bank required a guarantor. I had done all of this without an accounting and without a conversation about any of it being temporary. The deed for 3019 Linden Avenue was in my hand by 7:21 p.m. I drove to Martin Ashby's office on Powder Springs Street in Marietta on a Thursday morning at 9:23 a.m. Martin was a property and construction attorney I had used for the original lot purchase in 2009. I put the deed on his desk. I told him I wanted to build. He asked what I had in mind. I said a house. Single story. Detached. I said I had been thinking about it since 2009, and I was ready. Martin Ashby filed a notice of intended development on 3019 Linden Avenue with the Cobb County Permit Office at 11:38 a.m. on June 12th. The filing described a single-family residential structure, maximum 1,400 square feet, standard setbacks. I called Roy Caffrey on a Tuesday morning. Roy ran a licensed residential contracting operation on Whitlock Avenue in Marietta and had built 3 houses on our block since 2008. He knew the Linden Avenue lots the way you know a street you have worked on for years. He came for a site assessment at 2:14 p.m. on July 9th. We stood on the 3019 lot together, and he walked the perimeter and checked the old foundation slab and said the bones were good. He said he could have framing up in 6 weeks from permit approval. I did not tell Nathan or Patrice about the permit application. In the weeks that followed, Patrice moved quickly on her own plans for 3017. She hired a kitchen contractor for an extensive renovation. I saw the estimate, which Nathan forwarded me by accident, $38,000, and engaged a landscape company to redesign the front yard. She described these plans to her sister on the phone in the front room on a Saturday morning while I was in the kitchen. My stomach turned when I heard the landscape budget. She told her contractor that the lot at 3019 was undeveloped land that had been sitting empty for years. I let that settle for a long time before I moved. Nathan texted me on a Sunday in July. "Dad, everything is moving forward on our end. Hope you're doing okay with the transition." And I read it at 7:43 a.m. with my coffee at the kitchen table. I paused. Then I set the phone face down on the table and went to the study. The Cobb County Permit Office approved the building permit for 3019 Linden Avenue on the second Tuesday of August. Donna Chezik, the permit office supervisor on Lawrence Street, confirmed approval at 8:51 a.m. The permit board was posted on the lot that same afternoon, the standard orange and white placard that goes on a stake at the property line, visible from the street. Roy Caffrey arrived at 10:07 a.m. the following Thursday to begin the initial site preparation. Patrice's kitchen contractor was on site at 3017 at the same time, working on the cabinet removal. He walked out to move his truck and stopped on the driveway when he saw the permit board at 3019. He looked at it for a long time. Then he came back inside and said something to Patrice. I was in my study. I heard her footsteps in the hallway. The front door opened. I didn't move. I heard her on the porch. I heard her walk down the front steps. I heard her cross the driveway. My chest tightened when the silence came back. She came inside 2 minutes later. Her steps were different, slower, more deliberate. She appeared in the doorway of my study. Her face had gone very still in the way a person's face goes when they are recalculating something they had considered settled. She said, "Is that lot yours?" I said it was. She said, "Since when?" I said, "April of 2009. She looked at me for a long moment. Her hand was on the doorframe. She said, "Nathan didn't know?" I said he had not. The room held. She said, "What are you building?" I said, "A house." She said, "Nothing else." She walked back down the hallway. I heard her call Nathan's name. I picked up the deed from the desk and put it back in the fireproof box and set the box back on the shelf. Then I went to the kitchen and made coffee. The resolution took 11 weeks. Martin Ashby handled the formal agreement, which established that 3017 Linden Avenue would transfer to Nathan and Patrice on October 14th at fair market value, $387,000 for the Cobb County appraisal, and that the proceeds would fund construction at 3019, with the remainder going into my retirement account. Nathan paid the difference between the appraisal and his available financing from the joint account he and Patrice had been building for a house purchase. The transaction closed at 3:33 p.m. I moved into a rental on Kennesaw Avenue while the 3019 house was being framed. Roy Caffrey had to shell up by November. Leonard Burke, 65 years old, and the house at 3019 Linden Avenue has a south-facing kitchen window he designed himself. A man who plans 14 years ahead does not panic in an afternoon. His permit board, her kitchen renovation, a lot that had been paid for before she knew his name. When Patrice walked across that driveway and read the permit board for the first time, what do you think went through her mind? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.